Welcome to Conversations with Colie, where we have conversations about subjects we think about but often don't speak about. My name is Nicole Miller, and I'm the author of this book series, A through Z, Guide to Raising a Good Human, a series I wrote to help in the communication process. Welcome back to Conversations with Colie. Today I'm speaking to author T. Rose. T. Rose has written several books outlining her struggles with addiction and how she overcame them. Welcome, Tiffany.
Hi, thank you.
You're welcome. I want to start us off by reading the description of your book, The Trap. I read it and was like, this is so powerful, so we have to share this. What happens when a hard-working young Southern belle climbing the corporate ladder at the forefront of the computer revolution gets trapped in the dark underworld of drugs, crime, and prostitution? This is a true story of Tiffy Rose Baker's long journey from the hot West Texas plains and Sunday church picnics to the executive boardroom and shimmering nightlife of South Florida. Following her as she boards the bus, fleeing abuse and alienation in the dusty ranch country in pursuit of shattering the glass ceiling in a male-dominated business world. Dedication and hard work propel her up, but naivety and misplaced trust lead her into a darkness from which any escape may be fatal. The Big Trap is a tense and thought-provoking examination of the secretive world of drugs and vice and the high price success can extract from the unsuspecting. The Big Trap, just one last high, is the voice of one, but the story of many. I have goosebumps. I don't know if you can see them. That gives me goosebumps. I had to share that.
It was definitely an intense book to write. It took over 3 years to get it to print.
Wow. I can imagine. Wow. So I'm going to start us off with an icebreaker question, and then we'll just dive right in if that's okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So your icebreaker question is, what or where is your happy place?
Wow. Okay. My happiest place is the beach. I live very close to it here now in South Florida, and it just brings me so much calm. I mean, being in the water always did. I was a swimmer in my early teens, and just being in the water always calmed me. But being on the beach, it's just mesmerizing, right? Hearing the waves come ashore and sounds of the seagulls and soft breeze off the water. It's just beautiful. So that's my Zen place.
Yeah, I agree. I lived in Florida for 10 years. I left Wisconsin, moved down to Florida to Pasco County. And that was also my Zen place. Whenever the shit was hitting the fan, so to speak, I would run to the water. I'm afraid of water. So it was interesting to me to move to where there is all the water. And it actually helped me overcome my fear. So
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, I agree. All right. So tell us about yourself, a little bit about your background.
Okay, well, I am a devout follower of God as I understand him, and my life today is in no way my life of old. I have overcome what some would say was the loss adaptive child, or that would be the psychology term of it. And today, I am a confident person that overcame a lot as a businesswoman on a mission to bring healing to a broken world of lost souls who truly do want a better life. I'm also a mother of 2 and a grandmother of 5. And their healing after my own is why I've spent the last 20 years studying the complexities of the mind to understand my own self and then emulate that healing. That healing was possible for my family, because when my children were still almost in diapers, I walked away from everything to go and live my vice 24/7 for 10 long years on the street, and surviving that was
A miracle, I would say. Yeah.
It was a miracle. And so I took all of that, and as someone that really wanted to bring that awareness to the youth of today, right? I knew that as I was writing and changing and healing, I was seeing the same for my children. And I believed then that, okay, now let me see if I can write this out and see if it can be of any value to the youth of today, you know? I mean, because for most addicts, alcoholics, the true pain or core of their addiction is strictly to suppress the pain they suffered as children.
And that's going to lead us into my next question. Did you experience trauma as a young child?
Absolutely did. My father was physically abusive. My mother was verbally abusive. I also suffered rape as a child. And you squish all that into being a complete introvert. It was devastating. And
Did
the
you
only
suffer
way
your entire childhood, like from the time you could remember all the way till you turned 18 and got out of the house?
I did.
Yeah.
At 4 years old, my life was already so bad that my little brother and I made a pact, and we sat down with a boatload of baby aspirin in the middle of the night and literally tried to kill ourselves.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, can you imagine being 4 years old and knowing your life was already so messed up that you knew that it was going to possibly be the only way to escape
Is
what
death.
you could have foresee going forward. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I was 9 when I contemplated suicide because my childhood was that bad. I prayed to God, please, I don't want to be here. I want to die. So I can't imagine 4. So it must have been really terrible for you. I'm tearing up. Sorry.
No, I know. It was definitely, that's why it took me so long to write that first book, because it was,
Yeah.
and
That's a
to
lot.
relive all of that again was.
Yeah, and when you relive it, because I also wrote a book series, mine's more about communicating with your children because in my abuse journey, I was hit a lot, I was hated on a lot, and no one ever explained why. So when I raised my kids, I decided I was going to be very communicative, and so then I wrote a series called Sex, Suicide, and Substance Abuse, and it kind of highlights all my struggles with that and how to explain to your children, hey, if you're feeling this way or that way, it's important for them to kind of know, right?
It is, and to feel that they can share, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I believe that an abusive child is told, at least for me, don't tell anybody or
Right.
else, right? So here you are, your life's already a living hell, and then you're being threatened. You can't tell anybody that might possibly help you.
Yes. Yes. And I don't know about you, but back in my day, in the town I lived in, they kind of turned a blind eye to stuff like that. So if you went and told the teacher, it's not like they removed you from the home immediately like they do now. You would go home, they would confront, they would do an investigation. So meanwhile, while the investigation's going on, what's happening to the child? Being
Or
beaten, even worse. Exactly. And I think as abused children, we both probably knew, I ain't saying a word.
and that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
And which is why I have done what I'm doing after years and years of researching to understand, well, all these professionals, how come the system still seems to be failing, and actually the failures gaining speed instead of the help.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I think
right,
we stay silent about it. And that's the other reason that I wanted to write my book series was because we do sweep that stuff under the rug. We don't talk about sex abuse. We don't talk about substance abuse. Suicide would never happen in my family, right? So we tend to ignore it to make it go away. And what's actually happening is it's getting worse.
right, it all gets suppressed.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of, as you've done, right, to help explain, well, here's some of the things, the majority of kids don't get that,
Right.
and unless they go actively looking for their own answer, they're not going to get it. I mean, I went through
Exactly.
12 rehabs and 2 mental health hospitals, and when I finally was done with all of that, I was like, I still did not understand why. what
Right.
what was I missing that I could go through all of that and come out with nothing?
Right, right. So, how old were you? Well, first, let me just ask, how did you choose to cope with your trauma? For me, I was 13, started taking Xanax. So, for you, what happened to you?
When I was 12-ish, I had just been raped by my cousin for the second time. And I was doing some cleaning in the house and actually knocked a bottle of vodka over. Now, my family was already big drinkers and partiers, and they always said, "Well, let's go have a good time," right? Big family barbecues. But it always seemed like their good time ended up in some kind of violence.
Yeah.
Um, so I never could quite understand that. But it was about that time I started drinking, and I had at 14 took a job at a local diner, bussing tables, washing dishes. Then I had money, right? So
Mm,
then I had money to go and buy my own. And in the late 70s, early 80s, right? I could walk into the liquor store and kind of like
same.
smile at, right? And dude's gonna like, sure, here's some rum, go for it, right?
Yeah. I could get a bottle of whiskey and a pack of cigarettes and say it was for my parents, and I could have totally used all of that myself.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Then I had money to add in the weed, and it was just all downhill from there.
Right. Right. Um, so after you turned 18, did you then turn to a relationship to kind of get out of your family? Because I know that's what I did. A lot of people that are in abusive homes, they run to the next
Well,
home.
and that's true. And yes, first I went across the United States to
Oh,
Florida, right, to get away from my family, thinking that the geographical change would work. And I think many addicts believe that same thing. Oh, I'm going to just go across the country or to another state or another city, and that geographical change will be the answer, to the problem. And it's
right.
not, because you still haven't dealt with why you started using.
Yeah.
But yes, I did find I met somebody that also came from a traumatic, abusive childhood, and on the outside, he was always the happy-go-lucky guy. Everybody wanted to be his friend, but he really turned into that same abusive person that his dad was to him.
Hmm.
And so it just caused a lot of my childhood traumas to repeat themselves because
Hmm.
I still hadn't dealt with them, right? I mean,
Hmm.
I had only suppressed them with the drugs and alcohol that I had. And meeting him, we now added in cocaine, and
So it just made it even worse.
yes, it did.
Hmm. And I feel like when you come from an abusive home, you do what I call trauma bonding. When you meet somebody and they go, "Oh, I had an abusive childhood," and you go, "Me too," and then you bond over trauma. And really, what you're doing is keeping yourself in that cycle.
Right. You're staying in the sickness of it instead
Hmm.
of
Getting away.
right, or finding, yes, getting away.
So, would you say addiction snuck up on you, or were you aware that you were an addict while you were using?
That's a really cool question. I definitely don't think it snuck up on me. I definitely started out using very young, right?
Hmm.
By the time, like I said, I was 14, I was, already drinking and smoking weed, and um, but to internalize the fact that I was an addict probably didn't really hit me until I was done with it and I finally
Okay.
found recovery. That whole denial, rationalization, justification, it was just so deep because I mean, who wants to admit I was 4 years old and my life sucked so bad that I tried to kill myself?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and people, I think too, if you go to tell them something like that, they don't want to hear it in a way. They're more worried about their growing up problems. So your problems, they don't want to hear it and they don't want to believe it. You're telling them, "Hey, at 4 years old, I wanted to kill myself." And a lot of people or kids would be like, I don't think you really did. But they don't realize that, yes. that it's possible for a child to want to die because their life is that bad.
And I totally agree with you. I mean, that goes back to that denial, um, and I think that's the reason that most addicts and alcoholics stay stuck in that pattern of addiction. And it could be anything, sex, food, I mean, you name it, right? And because having to admit to yourself that, one, your life sucked that bad, then two, that you compounded that terribleness with adding in the substances to try to suppress it, which only created more problems down the road instead of the escape and the betterment that you thought it was supposed to bring to your life, which not even close.
Right, exactly. So, how did addiction affect your life, your relationships, and your children's lives?
Ooh, my life. It took everything from me. My marriage, my children, my job. I mean, I had a stellar career. I when I moved to Florida, before I really knew um, the path of the cocaine was going to take me down, I had graduated the top of my class in electronics in the early 1980s when PCs were just the thing, right? We're just coming to the market. I graduated at the top of my class. I was the only female. So, of course, I'm in there with these guys that are like, why are you here? You're just a girl.
Yeah. You don't have brains.
Right? And so I got a job at a computer manufacturing company that was just starting to do PCs for the general population. And I worked my way up from just an assembler to the supervisor of the production floor. And then became pregnant with my first child, my daughter, and they moved me into the office. And so I started learning all the office things and worked my way into the corporate office of it, until the cocaine was just took me out too far. And
So while you were like doing all that, you were using as well?
I was a functional addict for 15 years, and um, by the time I was just completely bonkers by everything, I had my son, my daughter and son are 3.5 years apart. Um, my husband at the time had created his own sprinkler, built his own sprinkler business in the state of Florida. I mean, like,
That's
that
huge, yeah.
it is, especially then, because with population or the growth was just beginning to boom here. And I mean, we had more money than we knew to do with, and it was detrimental more than productive. We lost everything because we let the drugs be more important than the business, my career, our children. So today I try and bring that awareness of I'm on trying to really focus it on the teens to give them a clear-eyed view of what that path down that road is going to look like. Because you ask any addict that has recovered if that road does not look similar, if not exactly the same, right? How destructive it is until they come all the way back to their teens and deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the whole thing is when you're an addict, the only way to recover is to get to the root of the problem of why you're using to begin with. For me, I told myself, "Oh, I just use drugs. I don't abuse drugs." Right? I just use them.
Right?
Yeah, that's the rationalization of an addict.
I hear you, Chloe. I hear you.
Can you share with us a rock bottom moment where you decided to say enough is enough?
I had probably one of the worst seizures ever. And I had died 3 different times, but in the end, my body had reached such a saturation point, my physical body, my brain, that just about any time I used, I would have a seizure almost instantly. I could actually feel them coming on.
Right.
And this last one was so bad that I bit my tongue. I've got pieces of my tongue that are gone. Um, Only by God's grace am I here, and that the police found me laying in the middle of this field and carted me off to jail on a outstanding warrant that I had.
Oh, wow.
And I was looking at a year in jail behind that.
Yeah.
Did I finally realize that, I couldn't continue to go on this way? And obviously, my best efforts at killing myself weren't working.
Right. Yeah.
And so it was like, okay, let's try something
God said,
different.
no, you get to stay here. Yeah. In my suicide journey, I realized it's not for me.
Oh, so that was probably the rock bottom. But the 10 years living on the street and doing whatever it took to stay high 24/7 was a bottom that I would try to talk anybody out of.
Yeah. Can I kind of dive into that a little bit? So you go from stupid amounts of money, having a home, having a family, to literally living on the street. Tell me a little bit about how you rationalize that, maybe live in that, and accept it for those 10 years.
My husband had just received his second DUI, was on probation for 5 years, couldn't drink and couldn't drug, and I wasn't ready to stop using.
Mm.
So in the middle of the night, one night, I got up, left my kids sleeping, took the car, went to the area where I would eventually live for the next 10 years, and found myself on the street trying to figure out how the ladies of the night did their job in order to support the the drugs that I was after, and
Yeah.
found myself in with the kingpin of the area, so to speak, and became one of the top girls living, in that reality. Being here right near Palm Beach, and we had some people with a lot of money that were clientele. So it was a degrading existence,
Mm-hmm.
but at the time, um, it gave me everything that I thought I needed in order to
Right.
stay high.
Right.
And um, being at the level I was within that organization, some of the beatings and whatnot that most of the other girls in the stable got, I didn't.
Mm.
Another blessing, I guess, of the Lord in the um, environment that I was in. But it was an ugly existence. Again, another part of reason why I've created the series I had, to bring that awareness, to
Yeah.
give these people a clear-eyed view, these children a clear-eyed view of the ugliness of that, of the ugliness of all the things it's gonna take from your life,
Yeah.
including in very quite possibly your life literally.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm sure that in what you were involved in, you saw women disappear, never come back.
I have.
Yep. Yep. Wow. And I think it's very important to share this because you never know. It only takes one time. When we come from addiction, we don't realize we're born with that personality. We're born with those traits that we can easily fall into. We're not just silencing our pain, but we also carry those traits that our family, who we grew up despising, and their behavior, we end up repeating.
Right, and it's only when you actually trigger them do they
Mm-hmm.
become active. I mean, if
Mm-hmm.
you had never actually triggered that whole wow, this kind of feels good. I think I need some more. That feels good. I need some more. It feels good. I need some more. Breaking that cycle and bringing that awareness is so important, in my opinion. I mean, I was blessed to, my kids were able to see the ugliness of what I went through as children, right? I wasn't there for them. When I did come around, you know, it would bring their hopes up and then it would be crushed again. And when I found recovery, their dad picked up right where he left off and died at 51.
Oh, wow.
4 days after his 51st birthday.
Wow. Wow.
And, you know, so yes, they have some emotional scars, but by the grace of the Lord, they never picked up the addiction personalities the way their father and I had lived.
Right. Well, your children weren't abused, correct? Like neglect
No,
is one thing because your parents are using, but not abused in the ways like you and your husband, correct?
no, they weren't.
Yeah. So that probably helped.
It did. It absolutely did. And I think, you know, back to your other question, as far as, you know, some of the rock bottom moments, I remember in you stating, you know, people just disappear. I was with this person one day with a gun to my head, and he took me out in the middle of nowhere, and I'm like, you can just leave me here, right? Just don't kill me, don't hit me in the face, just leave me here. And luckily I was able to talk my way, you know, through that in the middle of the night, out in the middle of nowhere, and found my way back. But so many people do disappear, girls and boys, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's a rough existence, you know, and one that I hope I can circumvent for
Others.
today. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're all here for a reason, right? And so, and we go through these things for a reason. That's how I've helped, to heal, is to say, maybe I went through this to teach how to not get caught up or how to get through it healthily.
Amen.
Yeah. So, how did you first seek help?
I didn't really have a choice in it. I was sentenced from going from jail, sentenced to then go to treatment after the fact. But the very last time that I actually went to jail on that 1 year sentence, I chose to be put back in one of the jailhouse recovery programs that I had been in before on my waiting period to actually go to an outside rehab from the jail. And this time I decided that I was ready to listen, to take in the advice that was, you know, being given to me, and not let my past define who I was, and to look to the future and embrace something new and better. And because I did that, and I graduated that 3-month program within the jail system, because I was stuck there for a year this time, wasn't going anywhere. And when I had completed it, I had petitioned the judge that had sentenced me for an early release. And because I had done so well in this program, he granted me an 6 months early release. So,
oh, wow. Wow.
I knew,
Congratulations.
thank you. And I wasn't going to take that for granted. And that's when I think I really set out to learn why. Why did all those other things fail me? What was I not listening for? Maybe what weren't they giving, right? That I was willing to reach the hand that was reaching to me, which is part of how I created or why I created what I've done in my writing. So
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing.
thanks.
Yeah. So once you got out, you stayed on the path of sobriety, never to look back.
That's it. 20 years this year. Next month.
Wow. That's amazing. That's
Thank you.
amazing. Yes. Um, during that time of in your early sobriety, did people from your past try to come back in to try to drag you in?
No,
That's good.
no, because I mean, they were too deep into where they were, and I had made sure I took myself into an environment where they couldn't reach me. And I mean, we're still talking about the late 90s. You know, the cell phones were just starting to be a thing.
Right.
And, you know, so it was mostly pagers. And, you know, so I changed my, you know, nobody could reach me. Now, I had in previous times when I had gotten recovery, thought that I was smart enough to go down and visit,
Ah,
and
yeah.
tripped myself up a couple of times that way, and allowed that, oh, just this one time you can do it and you go back to work tomorrow. Yeah, that didn't work.
Yeah, yeah. I think we all do that. Oh, I can go ahead and just this one time. One time. So, well, I guess we kind of skipped that. I was going to say, talk about your experience with that one last high because your book, that's the title of the book. Do you want to talk about that?
You know, that kind of just goes back to what I was just saying, right? That tricking yourself into believing you can get high one more time, you
Yeah.
can have one more drink. And there was multiples of that, because, you know, along that path, I had, as I said, had gone to rehab, you know, almost probably once every single year. At least, you know, the judge would sentence me to go to rehab, and I would get clean for a few months, and talk myself into, oh, I can just go down there and just have one. It
Yeah.
never worked. And, you know, back on the street I went. And so it it was a long, painful journey trying to learn that lesson that, you know, just once more is not going to work, especially in today's times with the
Yeah.
fentanyl everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a death sentence.
Yeah, and now you can't even use like certain THC products because they're laced with fentanyl and it's an instant death sentence. And most of your drug addicts and most of your alcoholics, it's the one more time that gets them in the end.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And today's opioid crisis is crazy. When I moved to Florida, it was in 2007 or 8. And I was from Wisconsin. I there was a little bit of an opioid epidemic there, but not much. I kept coming across people falling asleep at the stoplights, falling asleep taking their order at a restaurant. I'm like, these people are so tired. What is the deal? What are they doing? And then I figured it out. Like,
Oh, the
oh,
oxys, yeah.
oxys, roxys, all that weird. I was like, who looks at these people and goes, I want some? But I guess it's a
Well,
pain thing.
you know, I truly believe that especially the professionals that were using those at the time, you know, oh, I got a back injury
Mhm.
or hurt my ankle and got on those. But then they kind of thought it was socially acceptable, right? Because they weren't sticking needles in their arm or smoking off crack pipes. So
Mhm.
they were like, they were, well, I'm all good because, you know, it's just a pill.
Yeah, it's like suburban moms using the Molly.
Right,
Yeah, it's like
exactly.
an acceptable thing. And I think those drugs are designed to trick your brain into thinking you need them.
Oh
And
yeah.
so it keeps you in addiction. So what made you decide to help others outside your healing journey? What was it? Was that something that you always thought you were going to do as you were getting yourself together, or did something kind of happen to kind of say, I'm going to start helping other people?
Well, after I spent a good 10 years studying all the complexities of not only the physiology of addiction and what it does to the body. I also spent a lot of time studying the very texts that the psychiatrists and these people that are leading all these rehab centers are supposed to study. So excuse me, social workers and the lot. And I kept coming back to the same thing with all the different theories that they had, that they study and worked off of, which, are from the 1960s and 1970s. They haven't come up with anything new since then.
Right.
And the one thing that I kept coming back to was they wanted to use all these different types of therapy, whether it was cognitive behavioral therapy or all of them. The one thing that they all focused on is, how do you get the patient to talk to you? I'm like, well, duh. I sure didn't want to talk, and all the other people sitting around me didn't want to talk. So there's the big problem. How do you get them to talk? I'm like, well, that's very interesting. So when I realized that my healing was also changing the dynamic of my children and talking to them, as you were saying, when what you did with your work. And I'm like, maybe there's something to this. Maybe there's some disconnect that between the patient and the counseling people that are trying to help. What's this big abyss about? Why is there's such a hole there that nobody can seem to cross, and is causing this problem to get even worse? I mean, you add in the oxys where they believed it was so socially acceptable to be addicted to them because it's only a pill. Kind of same with alcohol, right? I mean, well, it's legal. I can go to the grocery store and buy some. So I can't be an addict. I mean, I'm not an alcoholic. I mean, I can still go to work.
Oh, I just have one beer a day after I get off work every day. Yeah, I'm not an alcoholic. No. Right?
Right. So I realized that maybe I could help change that. Maybe I could figure out how to create that bridge. And so I talked to my kids, let them know what I was thinking about doing. And now I did write my books under a pseudonym, and Tiffy's not my,
Right.
But I talked to them and I told them that I was going to do it that way to protect them, myself,
Yeah.
and protect myself from out there, because, there's still some haters out there that would not want what's written, especially in the big trap, to.
Right. They don't want that out. Right.
No, because I, laid out a lot of intricate things of that whole street life in that book.
Right. Which I find very important, by the way, and I commend you for doing that. That's brave.
Thank you. It was definitely a journey, but I believe that in bringing that insight to the youth of today can be very helpful. I mean, I've seen it in my own children, right? By telling them the facts of what that world was, other than what they thought they assumed or knew from me being gone, and occasionally Dad would drive them through town looking for me and stuff. I believe that I could bridge that gap. So I also created a Facebook group of and started asking a lot of questions. Well, what was it that you didn't get when you were in treatment? What would have helped you talk back to talk with the counselors?
Open up.
Right. And that's the dynamic I'm working on now. I'm almost finished with it. So
yeah, awesome. I feel like for me, I went to therapy for domestic violence issues. I didn't go for any addiction issues because I kind of was like, that's not a good look, and was able to do it on my own. I didn't have to look. I did go attend some AA meetings, and I'm like you. I didn't want to share. I felt very like, why do I want to get up and talk? I don't want everybody staring at me. What are they going to do to help me, kind of thing. And I think it's relatability. if you can relate to somebody who's been through it, when I would go to these domestic violence therapy sessions, especially group sessions, a lot of times they were run by women who had never experienced it. So they start regurgitating, well, that's what you're used to, so that's what you look for. That's not true. I did not start dating John Doe because I wanted him to whip my ass.
Right.
I wanted a white picket fence, quite frankly.
Exactly. Exactly. And domestic violence, whether you're the wife or the child, also is a big trigger for addiction.
Right.
As
Oh,
another
huge.
reason to suppress it, right?
Huge.
And so much trauma and pain, and in today, it's almost like you say, it just, oh, well, that's what you looked for, so that's what you're going to get. Well,
Yeah.
I didn't look to have my butt beat daily. No.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't want to be choked in front of my children. I didn't want DCF involved. I didn't want any of this. I did not ask for this life. But I had to finally find a few women who taught classes that said, I've been there. This is why you keep doing this. This is why. This is the mistakes. Here's a red flag list. I mean, if somebody would have handed me that in high school, that would have been huge because I used to say, if only when I meet these men, there was a list. And then I went to Massachusetts Domestic Violence Shelter and they said, here's a list. Holy crap. There's not enough information out there to teach our young ladies and men the red flags,
Exactly.
what
And
addiction looks like.
and as you were just saying, right? The counselors that you're sitting in front of never experienced that. So how can they really be able to understand what you feel? Which is what the other part of my program that I'm working on, where I'm almost complete, is training people that have had those issues to be peer specialists that can really sit within the group and relate to them.
Yeah.
And reach them and get them to feel comfortable enough to talk about their thing. Because, sadly, these rehab centers, especially these 30-day churn and burn programs,
Yeah.
I mean, basically all they're doing is letting them sleep for 30 days. And then they expect them to go out there and get a job.
Yeah.
Well, you did not teach them anything while they were there, and you expect them to go get a job now. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah. And also be able to not use and
Right.
how to tell those people because in some aspects of addiction, I'm sure there are people that their codependent user friends want to keep them in that addiction. Misery loves company, right?
Absolutely. I mean, they go home to the same broken, dysfunctional environment. I mean, 90% can't get away from that.
Yeah. Yeah, because
So they do need
I'm
to
like you. I've lived in state to state to state doing the same thing. Leaving because, oh, my problems will stay there. They won't follow me here.
It's right. That's what needs to be at the top of the checklist. This geographical changes do not work.
Yes, I do have to say, I found my help in the state of Florida.
That's good.
Yeah, the state of Florida saved my life, honestly. So I have to say, um, I commend them for that hugely. I've made some good friends that supported me and saw something better when I was at my lowest. So that was a good thing. What ways do you currently offer help to others struggling with addiction?
Well, I do have a support group online at Facebook. It's called Quest for Recovery Support Group, and I've been doing that for four years now. That
Mm,
particular group's only been a little over 3 years, but mentoring people as either in a group setting or personally, they can always reach out to me. And I am working on bringing this new program to, I want to first start it into the juvenile detention center and the prison system where they don't get much help, right?
yeah.
Um, and to those also in the shelters. that don't
Yeah.
have access to traditional rehab, right? I mean,
Yeah.
unless you are lucky enough to trip through a jail and be sentenced to rehab, and in most cases, those people, like I, wasn't ready, right? Or feel put off by it,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Already going into it not wanting to be there, so they're not going to get
Mm-hmm.
anything out of it anyways.
Right.
So trying to create an environment where the the desire for the knowledge is wanted as opposed to just feeling like it's being put upon you. So
Right. I like that because that's so true. I felt that same way when I was in probably about 6 domestic violence shelters. Some were very helpful in some ways, but they almost do like a turn and burn too. It's 3 months and you go from homelessness to you better have a place to live, you better have a job, and half the time when you run with nothing.
right, and
So, yeah, to be able to say, "Hey, if you want this help, here I am."
right, and so I've been very successful. I've helped a lot of people, and I'm looking forward to helping a lot more. I'm this close to getting uh, doing my application for an NIH research pilot program for the work that I'm doing. So I'm super excited.
Yeah. And do you think you'll ever offer something virtually in that same aspect?
Eventually, yeah, it
Awesome.
will be. It will be.
Awesome. I think
It's
that's
a lot of moving parts to getting it all together, though. Let me tell you what.
Oh, I know. I'm sure. Yeah, and a little bit of cheddar.
A lot of that.
Yeah. So when life throws hard things at you, as it does for us all, what ways do you handle it from a sober standpoint?
Well, today I try to analyze the whole thing, right? I can either overreact to it and let it derail me for days. Not that I would go back to using, but just emotionally or mentally, right? Just shut down or realize you're going to have to face it eventually. You can either shut it down and stick it in the corner, but you're still going to have to go over to the corner and deal with it. So I just try and take each um, adverse thing that comes at me, and they do,
Yeah.
they do, like you said, and just sort through it and make it work,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times I think people go backwards from sobriety, even sometimes a year in. They go back because problems start arising, you know? And so then that's their escape. Oh, well, I'll just drink this or I'll just use this one time to get through this tough spot. Or when you change your mindset from a negative thinking process to a positive thinking process, people are under this misconception that if you're a positive thinker, nothing bad happens to you.
right?
Yeah, and that's not
It,
true.
no, it's not. But the biggest problem with that is most of those people never dealt with those things from their that really sent them into addiction anyways. I mean, the old saying, being a dry drunk.
Mm,
Just because you're not drinking, just because you're not drugging, if you haven't dealt with those problems way back there. I mean, I was 40. I had to go all the way back to my teens to process through all that pain and trauma to be able to move forward again.
mm-hmm.
And until you do that, you're just kind of sitting there with it on your shoulder trying to ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have your suppressing agents or the alcohol or the drugs. So after a while it does get louder and louder and louder, and then you have some adverse thing coming. You got in a car accident. Now how the hell am I going to afford a car because I was barely putting food on the table?
Right. Right.
All right, and so instead of putting food on the table, now you're going to go and use the only money you had to put food on the table. I mean, it's like,
Yeah. Yes.
so.
I always say this. Okay. So my younger 2 kids' dad is a struggling addict still. He goes in and out of prison. He doesn't pay his child support for any of his 5 kids. And I once got a letter or I got a phone call from a child support lady and she said, he's in jail because he is been caught with possessing possession. And he's a drug addict right now, and so he can't afford to pay you. And I said, how the heck can he afford to have a drug addiction? It's expensive.
It is expensive, very expensive.
And that's the whole problem, is a lot of people don't sit and do the money on what you're spending to cope. It's a lot. You could have so much more if you would just put the money on paper, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. and that's true, right? In a presentation I just recently did, I said the same exact thing. Is, I got the question, well, I don't have time for outside support group meetings after I leave rehab. I'm like, well, if you had taken, because I don't have the money to go, right? To spend the time, but you had the money, as you just said, to chase your drugs, chase your alcohol, to chase what it took to get the money to get high.
Mm-hmm.
So you had time for all of that, but you don't have time a couple times a week for an hour to get some outside therapy to help you.
Yeah.
And you're right, because I'm spending like almost $1,000 a day getting high.
That's crazy.
That's a lot of freaking money.
Yeah. Don't you wish you could just have it all back in one lump sum?
Yeah. Well, there's nothing about that life that I want back, but
yeah. No, I'm saying the money,
money,
so that you could now use it for something healthy.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I agree. Because I did that with my mom's addiction. We were poor, but my mom had a lot of sources of income. When she divorced my stepdad, I got a child support check of X amount of dollars. She worked 3 jobs, but we never had food in our house. I wasn't able to have clothes. I had to buy my own stuff by babysitting. She never had money because they had bar tabs all over town. So when I sat down and said, this was how much you brought in, we were a middle class family, but you drug us down to low class because of your and your husband or your boyfriend's addictions. And that's the whole thing. I don't think that people kind of put it into that perspective of like, if I don't use, how much do I save? Besides my health.
But the selfishness of addiction doesn't allow that.
Yeah, I was a smoker for 25 years. So, I mean, there was that. When people were like, "Oh, if you quit smoking, you're going to save so much money." I was like, "Yeah, right." Because it's $5 a pack or $2 a pack or whatever, depends on what you smoke. And I realized that, yes, I gained a lot of money, but I also gained time.
Right.
I was wasting 10 minutes a cigarette, however many cigarettes. Now I have all my minutes back because I'm not stopping to smoke a cigarette.
Right, exactly. I mean, that was one bad habit I never had to quit. I think because when I was young, my parents chain smoked, and it was just one smell I cannot stomach, so.
Yeah, you're very lucky. I grew up in a place where peer pressure in the 90s, wouldn't you say? It was heavy back then, and I was hugely peer pressured into smoking, and that's how I ended up addicted to smoking.
Yeah, it was one thing that I never could stomach, but I mean, peer pressure is one of the core problems for even the youth today, right? Well, it's only a cigarette.
Mm-hmm.
It's only a beer. It's only a joint. And before they know it, 10 years have gone by, and they're like, now they've wasted so much money, so much time, so much energy. So.
Yeah. How big of a part of overcoming addiction comes from self-awareness?
Huge.
Yeah, all of it, right?
Huge. Yes. Yes. And that's the whole point of what the Quest series is about, is awareness. And
nice.
Yeah, so thank you.
Yeah, because I've noticed people who deny that they're an addict, it's because they're really not, they don't want to look inward. They stay blind to their own behaviors, and they don't want to admit it's them.
They don't want to admit it to themselves. Because once you admit it to yourself, then you have to actually do something about it. That's just like, You go to the doctor, he says you've got cancer. You can either take the chemo or not, right? But if you never went to the doctor, you didn't know. You just know you feel like crap, and
Yeah.
right. So then you've got the prescription to get better, right? So awareness to all the things you allowed into your life is traumatizing in its own, for a lot of people, right? Because then, as I said, then they actually have to realize they got to do something about it. Then they have to be accountable to themselves. If they were still blissfully ignorant, they didn't have to be accountable to themselves.
Exactly. Exactly. Because it used to baffle me. My mom is an alcoholic. Okay. She can go periods of time of not drinking, but she is an alcoholic. And I would say the word alcoholic and she would get automatically defensive. I wouldn't even have to be talking about her. And I was like, why is it so hard to say the word alcoholic? I never had a problem with that when I knew I was struggling. Do you know what I mean? And so I never could understand that. So that is a huge good point.
Right, because once you are, labeled, and I hate to use that term, but
Yeah.
once somebody stuck a label on you, whether it's an alcoholic, a drug addict, a prostitute, a criminal, then you are like, well, I can either continue to wear this label or peel it off and find a different one,
Mm-hmm.
responsible tax-paying citizen, a homeowner, a mom, a dad.
Yep. Yep. And you can tear those labels off, right? And you can change it. It's up to you, really.
It is. Yes, ma'am.
Starting over is tough, and addiction can drag you to very low points and may cause you to do things that you may not normally do. What do you say to someone who thinks, "Oh well, the damage is done. There's no turning the situation around."
I just tell them, look at me, right? 25-year addict. 15 years of that was completely functional, living, having a home, a business, a career, to walking away from it all, to 10 more years on the streets, to now here 20 years in recovery, a business owner, a homeowner, a grandma of 5.
Yeah.
You really can change your life, but it is awareness and mindset.
Yeah. And there's
Determination
some
and this.
pain. And there's pain involved in it. You got to feel it.
Oh, you do have to feel, and that's the biggest problem. They don't want to feel it,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
because that goes back to the accepting, right? And the awareness. Or as the example of going to the doctor and he says, okay, you're sick. Here's the treatment you can take or not. It is choice.
Mm-hmm.
It drives me crazy when these people, oh, it's a disease. No, it's a choice. It's a disease. It's both.
It's both. Yeah, it is both. We have the gene that can carry us, but that trauma triggers it, and we have to run to that vice before we can. So it is both.
It is. Until you
Hmm.
go back and you deal with pain, the vice is going to, and the vice is only a symptom.
Yeah.
The pain in the trauma is the true problem.
Yeah.
Right? When people look at the vice as the problem, the vice isn't the problem.
And I think that's why we have a lot of failure in the systems that are in place now, because they say it's a disease, you're sick, you need to take care of your alcoholism. They don't go, you need to go back and do some soul searching and figure out where, why, what are you hiding
Exactly.
from, what are you avoiding. Hmm.
Exactly. 100%. Exactly.
Yep. So tell everybody where they can find your books.
Well, The Big Trap, Just One Last High, Freed, A Recovery Plan, Quest, the Addiction Recovery Intervention by T. Rose, are available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and just probably about every bookstore out there
Wow,
globally. So yes,
that's awesome.
you can also check out my website at Tiffy Rose, the number one, the word recovery.com. And on Facebook at T Rose Recovery, abbreviated RCVRY. And my homepage has a link to all the rest of the stuff that I do.
Which I will go on there and I will put that all in the show notes so that everybody can see that and know where to look for that. That's
Okay, great.
awesome.
Yeah, my Instagram, which I don't really like pound on that one too much
I
between.
don't think a lot of us like our age do.
And I do have a nonprofit that it works in the back, trying to help people get the materials to help them with my program at Quest for Recovery Network Inc.org. If you're going, or yeah, so all those links are there on my main profile.
Okay, I will definitely be sure to include all those.
Okay.
Um, if you could offer any sage advice to someone in recovery, what would it be?
Don't give up on yourself. You have it within you to recover. And as we were speaking of admitting to yourself that the alcohol and the drugs are a symptom of the true problem that forced you there, for whatever reason, you can heal from that.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it's going to be scary. It's going to be painful to deal with that pain that you've been suppressing for all these years, but you really can do it, and you can have a magnificent future ahead.
Yeah. And like, I don't know about you, but when you were writing your book, did you relive and re-experience some of those childhood traumas
I did.
and have to grieve through them?
Again,
Yep,
yes.
I did too. But didn't you feel lighter after?
I did. I
Mm-hmm.
did. And I'm excited about helping others be able to reach in and feel that place too,
Yeah.
right? And being able to move past it, because that's the ultimate goal, is being able to move past it.
Yeah. So, what do you say to an addict who may have mistreated friends and family during their addiction?
Well, I surely did. And you can either continue to beat yourself up over it for eons, or you can offer them, some kind of an apology. You have to forgive yourself. If you can
Mm-hmm.
forgive yourself, whether they ever forgive you or not is kind of irrelevant, honestly, sadly, but it is. Um, Forgiving yourself and being able to move forward is what's important.
Mm-hmm. And really true, the road to recovery really begins with you.
Right.
So if you don't ever gain those family members or friends back, at least you can make peace and move on. And you'll get more friends and family along the way.
You will. And if they were part of the negativity that ran you into addiction in the first place, maybe they shouldn't be there anymore anyways.
Amen to that. Yep. Do you have anything else that you would like to share with everyone?
No, I don't think so. I think we did a great job covering it, other than, your self-healing is yours to find, and you can do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree 100%. So I'm just going to do a little plug. If you or anyone you know is struggling with addiction, there are places to turn to. Please call 1-888-804-0792. It's free and confidential. You are not alone. Or reach out to someone like Tiffany, right?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I enjoyed our conversation thoroughly.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Yes. If you liked this and other episodes, please click subscribe, like, and share so others can enjoy them too. Thank you so much for listening.